Okay, so I've got lots of information to share with you all, and thank you all for plugging into this, another Zoom event. And so I've got lots of information. I'll go rather rapidly through it because I also found out that my time is a little bit less than I thought. So you should consider that you'll watch this thing, you'll get hopefully turned on, probably some new acronyms for you. Hopefully not, but probably. And then you'll get turned on to some new ideas and issues that we are dealing with on the coast. There's a lot going on, and myself and the team of folks that I get to work with is pretty vast, and it's really impressive for me to be a part of these teams. So here we go. Okay, let's see if that, okay. So these are the things I'll be talking about is the marine reserves and the ecological values of this Hesita perpetua area. And then of course, we'll be touching on the marbled murrelet and our citizen science project. MAMU is marbled murrelet. And then I'll be touching on landscape, carbon conservation issues, as well as some coho if we got time, coho recovery strategies. So I just want to make sure that you know that you'll see a lot of visuals. And basically, I know a lot of folks have been, quarantined into their little circle. And so tonight, consider it a tour of our Central Coast landscape as species and landscape combined. And so this issue of marine reserves, marine protected areas, when we brought that issue forward, we realized that we were pushing, the fishermen thought, oh, it's all about marine reserves, it's all about fish. Well, you talk about ocean conservation, you're talking about seabirds and forage fish. And so that was one of my roles, is to bring the issue of truly marine biodiversity into the discussion about ocean conservation. Includes whales. And so what came out of it, which was a very, as you probably know, pretty contentious number of years, but we had a really solid group of folks, and we had to identify parcels, help the community identify parcels that were of interest in ecological values. And if you don't know, we came up with Cape Falcon, Cascade Head, Otter Rock, our area at Cape Perpetua, and then down at Redfish Rocks. And so, to be honest, we were hoping for a network, and had a size and spacing workshop where we brought scientists from around the region together, and we thought we were going to get a network, but we have a few gaps, and so at this point it's more of a system as opposed to a full-blown network, and that's based on spillover and connectivity in the current system. So as you may know, Davidson Current goes from south to north, and California Current goes from north to south, and juvenile rockfish or whatever move within those currents. And so this idea of settlement is a big deal, and there's some science behind how far they should be apart in terms of this connectivity piece. And Holly's going to send you out a thank you note, I guess, or with some other information, and you'll have a link to this video right here, which we will not see today, but hopefully you'll get to watch it. And it's a state park video that walks you through marine reserves and marine protected area. It's a really solid little 4.5-minute summary, really beautiful. They did an excellent job. But one of our partners at Strawberry Hill State Park, I assume most of you have run up and down the coast, and maybe you've stopped at Strawberry Hill State Park. They have a long-term research project at Strawberry Hill. So it's Partnerships, Interdisciplinary Studies of Coastal Ocean, PISCO. And they talk about scientific evidence about causing decline in ocean health, and marine reserves have proved to be an effective way to protect habitats and biodiversity. So it's a tool that is basically, Dr. Ballantyne in '75 was the father of that effort. And some of us brought him to the Northwest and had him go on tours, and we set up old videos and educational things. And now we've got the beginning of a network of marine reserves in Oregon that mirrors other projects, other regions around the world. And so I was a part of the Marine Fish Conservation Network, the policy dealing with that talking about how Oregon should be managing their native fish. And so there's some basic principles that came out of that is absent of information to inform management or precautionary approach should be used. And so when you realize that the agency really doesn't have the capabilities to establish population estimates and trend lines for the many species it's managed. So this idea of marine reserves as a tool, as a precautionary approach, it really does make sense. It is an insurance policy is one of the phrases. And then so I was appointed to the OPAC, Ocean Policy Advisory Council, and we came up with this policy guidance document, which was really challenging, to be honest. And it's kind of like pulling wisdom teeth, so to speak. But one of the goals was protect and sustain a system of fewer than 10 in Oregon's territorial sea. That territorial sea is 0 to 3 miles. Federal waters goes all the way out to 200 miles. So this territorial sea is state waters. And so you can see these, and I just cherry picked out of this really nice document. Just 2 key objectives about the value of what we're doing, why we're doing it: protect key habitat types, multiple locations in the near shore, enhance resiliency, use them as reference areas. These are basically principles in this policy guidance document, which was again a really solid piece of document to lead us onto the next step. And again, drawing attention to species, not just fish, was part of my agenda. But just to give you a reality check of some of these rockfish, that they're old and they play an amazing role. And so when you go to the store and you go, oh, let's go, honey, let's go get some fish for dinner. How about some rockfish? Well, here's just a list of these rockfish. And so in the near shore, quillback, and you look at the age of those, 90 years old, China, 80, blues and blacks, those are the 2 kind of like go-to rockfish, 40 years old, 50 years old. And then you go further out the shelf and further out in the slope, and you've got some that are 200 years old, 120 years old. I mean, it really is unbelievable. And so this researcher out of the Marine Science Center was the one who kind of started his team of folks at the Marine Science Center were the ones that kind of grabbed the flag and says, hey folks, these animals live long. And everybody goes, wow, this is interesting. And they're, anywhere from 18 inches to 2 feet, but they're very long lived. And they found out, wow, they're very fecund, which is the female has lots of eggs. And so this one on your right, and this is just an average number of young produced by different sizes of vermilion rockfish, just one of the suite of rockfish out there. But she's capable of producing 1.7 million offspring. And then as you go down in size, you can see, oh, it's only 150,000. So you have these 2 pieces of the story. They live long and they're very fecund. And so if one has a management plan, you should make sure that you protect a subset of the population so they do achieve that maximum productivity, that 1.7 million offspring. So of course, prior to the 80s, when Steve Berkeley was doing the research and the team, there was no real understanding of this. So they're long-lived and they're very fecund. But you put those 2 things together, and the new science that came out during that time was related to this issue of decadal oscillation, which is ocean productivity going up and down. And so all of a sudden you put those 3 things together and you realize, oh, I get why they're long-lived and I get why they're very fecund. Because you hit the jackpot every 10 years, maybe 15 years, and all of those offspring go into a good ocean condition. But it may be 5 or 10 years where you're not hitting the jackpot, going into a fresh ocean condition. So again, it's kind of like a steelhead that has 5 years coming back to spawn, go back to the ocean, make a big loop up to Alaska and come back and spawn again, 2 salts. Those are survival mechanism. That's genetics. That is, they've worked it out. And so, but we didn't really know all of that. So we were overfishing, the Pacific Fishery Management Council and the fleet, unbeknownst. There was no plan to overfish. It was just like, we didn't have the information about these long-lived rockfish. So of course, there was a rockfish closure, RCAs, rockfish conservation areas identified up and down the whole West Coast. The most draconian conservation effort, I believe, maybe equivalent or equal to the East Coast crash for the cod. But we've come out the other end with a success story where the agencies and the fleet actually bit the bullet, did what they needed to do, and had RCAs set up. And the recovery is the agencies are giving each other high fives. So you protect a subset of the habitat and you start to get recovery. So it's another story that's out there on the oceanscape. And so I get to be at the top of Cape Perpetua and speaking with folks and recruiting speakers to help. And this is a retired docent who works at Cape Perpetua, the Visitors Center, one of my partners. And he's from the Gulf of Mexico dealing with MPAs down there. And so I'm really fortunate to be able to bring folks out into the field to these gorgeous places and talk about conservation issues and strategies. And of course, we've had some problems with sea stars. I won't even go into that discussion right now. And this back to the marine reserves. This are fully protected from activities from removing the marine reserves. And you study them around the world, the scientists do, and it's a consistent response. Increased biomass, diversity, size of fish within the marine reserves. They work. You protect it and it works. And they studied them in a few hundred locations around the world. And of course, when this map was produced by PISCO up in Oregon, there was no marine reserve, so we have no site for part of the research opportunities there. But here you go. You come back with this increased biomass, density, size, diversity, consistently, whether it is in our waters, temperate waters, or tropical waters. It's the same response. You protect the habitat, you don't catch them, they grow, they produce, and they're very fecund, they're very productive. And then so we came out the other end of this thing after reality. It was controversial, but we came out the other end with the sites, Cape Falcon, Cascade Head, Perpetua, down there at Redfish Rocks. And so this is where we are right now. And they'll be reviewing the effectiveness of ODFW's program and how the community embraces it. What are the implications for the fleets, different fishery sectors in 2023. So we're raising awareness and appreciation for the sites. Hopefully you will have already been aware of marine reserves, marine protected areas. And if not, hopefully you can get on a website and a link that I'll share later on and raise your level of awareness and appreciation. Maybe come on our field trip in the future. And here's our footprint from north of Yachats up to Smelt Sands. And then that's a marine protected area where there's some extraction, like fishing in the water column for salmon and crabbing on the sand. And then a no-take marine reserve, which is the red section. And then same way with the south, a marine protected area and a seabird protected area where there's some extraction, but not, it's not all open. And so our footprint, this ballpark is about 20 miles. It's the largest marine reserve, marine protected area in the state. And then so for our footprint, we have rocky intertidal, subtidal, gravel bottom, and offshore we've got Aceto Perpetual Bank. It's a complex. In Stonefield Bank, that's like a triangle out in the ocean. And so the adults will have this onshore, offshore migration. So there's a relationship between that and juveniles and retention area on the shelf out there. So it's really a unique feature. And then of course, in our footprint, we have the sea lion caves, which is a primary winter nursery for stellar sea lions, which are listed in 96 under the Endangered Species Act. And of course, we have the ongoing visits, whether they're heading south towards Mexico or back towards Alaska. And of course, this is spring break era, a few weeks, and they're heading north right now. And it's one of those good news stories, actually. I'll get into that later if I do have time. So this is Sea Lion Caves, and they're a partner in our Cape Perpetua Collaborative. We do seabird monitoring in the cave and at one of the mileposts looking down on a colony there too. And so ODFW, Oregon Fish and Wildlife, has done reef surveys in these rocky patches and these long-lived rockfish, those ones that we're speaking about before that were designated as depleted, yellow eye, canary, you know, and blues and blacks, all of them were present in our footprint. And so that's in 2000. So that was before we even moved forward with marine reserves, marine protected areas. They were studying our rocky patches and small reefs. So there's 60 disjunct rocky patches. And when we talk about in the near shore, that's one thing you're looking at. But in reality, we're doing a ridgetop to reef strategy, which, since we have the wildernesses and small catchments, basalt headlands, we have this opportunity to link ridges to reefs in a way that's pretty credible. And of course, we've got brant cormorant nesting, which is the largest mainland breeding colony, and marine mammals at multiple locations, pupping area, and the highest concentration of the murrelet in Oregon, which was designated as a globally significant important bird area in 2012. And there's an adult with a forage fish. I can't tell what species it is. If you look closely, you'll see the chick and its little furry, not even feathered yet. Other visitors on our coast. And this is at Strawberry Hill State Park, the haul out, harbor seals. And so another program that I get to be a part of, Audubon, is this important bird area program. If you don't know, you've got an important bird area in right close proximity to Eugene, Fern Ridge. And then of course, around the state, we have about 100 of them. 100 IBAs, designated IBAs, and anybody can nominate it, and they have to meet a criteria. And so in the process, Portland Audubon, university researchers, whole list of folks came together to talk about IBAs around the state, about 100 of them, and about 30 of them are on the coast. And the group of folks says, you know what, we've got some hot spots in the ocean. So they came up with this concept of at sea important bird areas. And the group designated a Cedar Banks, Perpetua and Stonewall Banks as a marine important bird area. And then, and so that's a really unique program that we initiated in the early 2000s. And then when you look to the terrestrial side again, because of the Northwest Forest Plan, we have multiple tier 1 key watersheds, including 10 Mile Creek and Big Creek, Cape Creek. And of course, we've got the two wildernesses, Cummins and Rock Creek as well on the terrestrial side. But back again to these important bird areas, and so you realize that we've got this breeding origin of seabirds in the California current. So I don't think you can see my cursor, no. But if you look at the North Pacific there's a little arrow that, or the current comes across the North Pacific and hits British Columbia and then heads down towards Baja, Mexico. That's the California current. And it's really incredibly ecologically significant for multiple reasons. And so you can see how special it is for our seabirds. You've got birds that are coming all over the Pacific to feed in the California current, okay? And so just as an example, you've got some of them that are off the Astoria Canyon to the tune of 700,000 birds every year will come and feed off of the plume of the Columbia River, Astoria Canyon. And then you'll have some other birds, the albatross, that are coming from the atolls in the South Pacific and will leave the chick unattended to go and feed, to turn around and come back to feed the chick 1,000 miles one way. It's like the equivalent of someone in Yachats going, I've got to go find some food. I'm going to go to Denver and then turn and come back and feed my family. Really is spectacular that this California current can be so rich. So there's a couple of articles. Some folks describe it as the Serengeti of the oceans. It's that productive. And so to back up a little bit, this same important bird area program that Portland came up with, that concept of at sea important bird areas, said, well, we've got these hot spots that are up and down the whole West Coast within the California current. we should pull a team of folks together. So someone immediately says, well, I know the Pro Natura folks. Let's call Anna down in California, and we got Oregon, Washington. Let's call Peter in DC and BC, and let's get up to Alaska. And they came up with a new concept, which was B2B, Baja to Barrel, 200 sites identified, 33 million seabirds, 150 species, designated as a marine important bird area network, Baja to Barrel. So you can see this, pretty spectacular. And then so for us on the Central Coast, I mean, it's amazing to me to get to go to Yaquina Head and see 60 to 80,000 murres. But in reality, in that million zone of seabirds, some colonies are 1 million strong in Alaska, which I haven't been there. It's on my wish list. But this is what we have. We've got some spots that are thousands and thousands of birds in Oregon's waters. And so one of the other things that I get to do is deal with educational and research partners. So again, the research that the agency ODFW has been doing in 10 Mile started in the early 90s, and PSCO's been there for 20 plus years. So you've got these partners of research and ongoing education field trips with Audubon, the National Forest, Watershed Council, and of course, all I need to do is make one phone call, and I have these a team of federal and state agencies walking through the different stations on a driving tour. So the marbled murrelet, as most of you may know, were listed under the Endangered Species Act in the early 90s. Washington actually uplisted in California to an endangered status. And then Oregon, we petitioned for an uplisting because if you get in Oregon, if you get a endangered status, then you have a recovery plan and a commitment to a monitoring strategy. So right now it's was recommended to be endangered status, and then ODFW, Fish and Wildlife Commission, reversed that last June, and they're going to be discussing that in the near future. If anybody's interested in that, I can give you the details, and you could help us with that, a voice, clear voice in front of the commission. But this is an example of a potential nest tree for that marbled murrelet, and that's a summer plumage. And just to drive home this issue of, and this map on the right with the bars, okay, you can see the upper portion is Astoria, and as you come down to the central, that's from Walport to Florence, and you can see the bars way out there. It's high abundance, and of course that's because of the wilderness and the Siuslaw National Forest. We still have patches and pockets of older forest conditions. And when I was on the murrelet team, I was more of the grunt, climber, photographer. And so this was actually the first nest we found in Oregon. If you go to the top of the tree, and you can see the branch that goes out to the right, and go out to the right about 4 feet, and you see a little bitty window. And then you can see the head of the first murrelet nest we found in Oregon. I'm in an adjacent tree about 180 feet and about 200 feet away from that nest, from the tree. So that was the first one found in Oregon. So this footprint of that I deal with Audubon is, there's the two wildernesses. You can see Yachats, designated globally significant in 2012, and the National Forest. And these are all actions as a result of the Northwest Forest Plan, road decommissioning, and then of course for us, Audubon, orchestrating acquisitions and restoration. There's road decommissioning, influencing the state agency, federal agencies, and partnerships, and McKenzie River Trust. It's kind of hard for me to believe, but it was, I think it might have been, maybe Holly will tell us for sure. I think it was about 10 years ago. The community invited them in to help with creating conservation easements on five ownerships, 500 acres in the basin. And there's other opportunities for acquisition in the basin as well. We hope we can materialize those. And so we've orchestrated multiple acquisitions in partnership with the National Forest. The biggest one was 1,000 acres at Upper 10 Mile. And then the most recent large one was at the mouth of Big Creek, which was a conservation strategy that actually dates back like 30 years. There's a book on it called Saving Big Creek by Andrea Scharf. And so these are actions that we've been a part of, working with the agency, trying to influence their management regime. And again, I get to be out on the top of the Cape, walking folks through these strategies. But this is an example of what you as the public can do if you choose to engage in these watershed analysis, an acronym for you, a WA, W-A, watershed analysis. So you as the public get to pose questions, then the Forest Service has to answer the question. And so for me, I get to pose the question, what roads are impacting watershed function? So if you know that this road right here, which is Cape Creek, near Hasita Lighthouse, just upstream about 4 miles, every time that channel wants to move in the floodplain, because of a large wood falls in it, or it starts a road, the road network is, oh, we got to protect the road. Well, you pose the question, then they have to answer it. And there is a road network that you can actually, we identified this as an opportunity and a priority. And next thing you know, we decommissioned the road and 3 bridges in partnership with the hydrologists, the fish bios, etc. And the game has changed. So we have now a mini roadless area. But in this footprint, we've got 8 key watersheds, 86 square miles, 100 miles of fish-bearing streams, and of course, chum, as well as steelhead, chinook, coho, lamprey, and eulachon. Most folks aren't savvy to eulachon. It's another one that it's kind of a sleeper, even though ecologically it was one of the most abundant anadromous species when we showed up in the early 1800s. And it's a cumulative effects issue, I believe, on the decline, and they're still present in the Columbia, but they're in 10 Mile Creek because of the research project that the agency's been going on since 90. So I'll talk more about that later on maybe. And this is Big Creek. This was that acquisition I mentioned before. So now that's public land from the ocean going up. So it's a state park. And this is a restoration project. And this is our community science. We've been doing it for 15 years, where we do an education night, then we go out in the field, and I know where to take folks, and we have different stations, 6 different options, and everybody gets to see and hear birds out in the field. And then we come back, have a cup of coffee, green salmon, and then I go out to the viewing platform, set up the scopes. Everybody gets to see the bird on the ocean and the near shore. So it's really, we've kind of got it dialed in. And so this is out at the sanctuary with my crew, and that's what we're looking for. Believe it or not, they fly about 50 to 60 miles an hour, and they'll nest as far away as about 50 miles from the ocean. So they're carrying a little fish to feed the chick, sometimes multiple times a day. And it really is an unbelievable life history pattern for this unique seabird. And that's another potential nest tree. And if you look close at the way that branch goes out and then goes directly up, there's actually a hormone change with this old growth Doug fir. Had one of those big storm events, those 90-mile-an-hour winds blew the top of the tree out. Those lateral branches that would have been out as like solar panels reaching out 30, 40 feet away from the trunk of the tree. When the top blows out, there's actually a hormone change, and they'll turn and start to slowly move as I'm the leader, the main leader of the tree. Those branches get nice, big, and fat. You could almost do a do-si-do up there if there were 2 climbers up on top. And and there's a moss mat that forms, so they don't bring any nesting materials. That moss mat's about 3 inches thick, and then they just make a nest cup, and that's where the egg gets laid, and the chick will hang there for a number of weeks before it fledges, plucks all the down off, and one shot to go to the ocean and find dad on the male and the father on the ocean, and it just is an unbelievable life history pattern. The reality is we've got birds that eat fish, and so you've got the controversy in the lower Columbia. The problem with salmon is those birds are eating fish. They've been eating fish for millions of years. It's not the fish's problem. It's the way we've been treating the land, and we really have to deal with it. Birds eat fish. Birds eat fish. And this is the research project that ODFW runs, and sometimes I will get an intern to help them. And so it's really one of our stations. Everybody gets to see juvenile smolts that are heading to the ocean. So steelhead, chum, chinook, coho, and it really is a great setup to have this project that goes in the water. It's in the water now, and it'll go around until the numbers are so low, which is normally like mid-July. And this is what you're catching. And so it's interesting to hear more about these age structures of steelhead, some of them going out at 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. And it's a survival mechanism. And it really is unique life history patterns. And that's diversity. Those are what we want to make sure we cultivate. And a helicopter large wood placement project that 10 Mile did, partnership with the National Forest, Audubon, the community, and ODFW. One of the biggest helicopter projects, actually may have been one of the first large helicopter projects in the 90s, and it's ongoing research still in place. Really is an impressive commitment by ODFW and the Sayulston National Forest. And I'm fortunate enough to have Angel Job Corps in our neighborhood, north of Yachats. And so there's a forestry crew, and I get to share with them restoration actions. They get to talk, learn about forest conservation, snag creation, tree planting, all related to watershed processes. So it's a great opportunity for them to have these on the ground actions that are field experiences. But sometimes when we do that Murrelet survey and you do the morning survey and you come back, the fog is so thick you can't even see the first up past the first wave. And we beat the drum for this crumb clean campaign because of crows, ravens, and jays. Those are corvids, not covids. And so it's a big deal. They are smart animals, these ravens and jays. And so there's a predation issue that's very real. It's related to edge effects and the way we treat our garbage and way our feed our animals. And forage fish was a big deal. And there's a full-blown campaign nationally. And the agency was really a solid process working with various fleet conservation, because you realize that that food web is so critical to whether you're a halibut fisherman, whether you're a whale watcher, whether you're a seabird seabird specialist, all of them are related to the health of forage fish, not just the marbled murrelet, although you can see their priority: krill, sand lance, sardines, anchovies, and juvenile rockfish. And that food web is so real. And so out of that came a forage fish protection strategy, and that was 2016. So it was a really solid working relationship with the agencies. And if you haven't been fortunate enough to see a bait ball, we've seen it from the top of the Cape. It is pretty amazing. And of course, maybe you've seen it on television. It's anytime, it's amazing. So, and you can see all the species that are directly linked to the health of those forage fish. And one of them, again, is this Ulicon. And candlefish, you dry them out and it actually burn. They're so oily. And so it's a really unique life history again. And that's one that they caught at the smolt trap at 10 Mile. And just to let you know that there's these, again, life history patterns and feeding techniques. All of these are different techniques in order to make a living and survive in the ocean. But back again to the murrelet, like I said, can go down to 200 feet and fly in to feed your chick. Really is a spectacular life history. And then same thing around the world, just like I was mentioning before, on the West Coast through the Pacific Fishery Management Council process, but all of the other federal council process, we're dealing with the same forage fish issues. And I don't know if you folks have actually seen Pacific lamprey, but they're about 3 feet long. Haven't changed in about 300 million years. Research projects, Oysterville, this is in Yaquina Bay. It's one of my hats I wear is working with Wetlands Conservancy. I do the same thing. I do with Audubon. I do that with them in these priority areas identified in the state's conservation strategy. And this is Beaver Creek. This is one of our priority areas identified in all the recovery plans, the conservation strategy. So the community invited Wetlands Conservancy there, and I got invited to be the manager. And now we've got a 1,600 acre state park with Wetlands Conservancy right in the middle of it. And engaging with the community on restoration actions. These are yellow flag iris. I don't know if you've got projects like this in the Willamette Valley, but this was quite the project. And then another priority area, the Oxbow Alsea Bay, identified in the estuary plan in '82, but right time, right place. We helped secure that before it was in a development stage. And now we're developing a restoration project on it. And I think I'm out of time. So you're going to have to review some of this climate carbon information on your own. Holly will send out a link, but blue carbon is a big deal. And that's estuaries, tidal marshes, eelgrass, and folks are engaging in these restoration actions in tidal marshes. It's a big deal. And we're influencing federal, you're looking at Forest Service land that's lower Drift Creek. If you went upstream about 4 or 5 miles, it'd be a Drift Creek wilderness. And this is another priority area. This is Pool Slough. And this is a mitigation effort where I work with ODFW related to Highway 20 straightening project. And there are natural climate solutions. I've got a link to this document called Natural Climate Solutions. And it's almost 40% of what we need to do. How our natural climate, improved land stewardship, longer rotations, riparian restorations, those things are very real. And it is co-benefits, multiple benefits. And these are coho recovery graphs that you can look a little closer, and you can call me and we can walk you through it, make sure you understand that how things have changed, and we've got a trajectory heading in the right direction. And I just want to make sure that you know that you can engage on this beaver conservation issue. It's a very big deal. And the state agency, on the one hand, when they're doing the right thing, I work together. And when the agency isn't, I turn my hat around and I'm an advocate, and I am an advocate on this issue. The ODFW has to change their policy on the way they manage beavers. And so there's a House Bill 2843. You can engage in that and help us raise awareness about this ecosystem engineer. Or you could jump on a brown pelican survey or one of our BioBlitz surveys. And just to make sure that you know that there are other issues on the horizon. Wind and marine renewable energy, the Rocky Shore Management Plan is being updated right now. Elliott State Forest, the sea otter recovery plan. Oh my gosh, it would be really awesome to bring sea otters back to Oregon. And of course, the estuary plans are being updated, and Sunflower Star designated as critically endangered. Sea level rise, it's happening. And so now we go into how you can get involved and our partners and information. We can get you this stuff. Here are links to this. And here are some documents that I urge you to kind of, if you want to do your homework on carbon and biodiversity and co-benefits, there you go. These are all links that'll take you right to it and walk you right through the climate change and coastal Oregon. And the link at the mid-coast has a link in our website related to beavers. And then we've got a number of videos and background documents. And And then here's volunteer opportunities from Sea Star, beach cleanup, water quality monitoring, BioBlitz efforts. All these things are in play on an ongoing basis around our Central Coast. And I'm really fortunate to have helped orchestrate this iNaturalist BioBlitz effort. We drew a large footprint, and so it's not only the Marine Reserve, Marine Protected Area, but it's also the 80,000 acres of the uplands. And we're in the 9,500 observations, 1,400 species. And we've got partners that are doing observations. About 1,000 of us do observations. And here's our collaborative that we formed a number of years ago, and it's ongoing. We're fortunate enough to have, if you haven't met Tara Du Bois, she's our communications person, and awesome. And we do these events on Saturdays, as well as we've come up with not only community science and projects, but we also have come up with some other things related to the Young Scientists webinar series, where we bring the budding young grad student or PhD, and we get to hear about their research. It really was a good idea. I'm really glad we came up with that. And we get to hear some very interesting talks with the next generation of scientists. But all these things are on an ongoing basis and an opportunity for you to take a break from the valley or wherever you are and come over and engage on our landscape. And here are the photo credits. These are all partners. Okay. Holly, do you want to?
Yeah, if you want to stop, well, actually, we could leave the screen on if you want. That's a lovely photo while we ask questions of you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. That was so much information, and I am ready to join you in the field any day you invite me. I'm ready to go out there.
Okay.
So a couple questions for you here that popped up. Here's one. I have been fishing for rockfish with guides out of Newport and Lincoln City. They never know the stats on survival rates for those that are undersized and thrown back. Do you know about the survival rate of rockfish that are not kept and implications that would have for actual catch numbers?
That is a really good question that should be answered by a long-term research project. They've done a number of survival methods with, it depends on how you release them, depends how deep they were, if they use the cage and bring them down and then release them out of the cage. And, basically it's barotrauma. Their bladder explodes or gets so large for folks who don't know. So it's a complicated issue. It's variable depending on the depth and the person fishing and how it's released. But it is a really good question.
Great. So there was a news story on NPR this morning that was talking about ocean temperatures rising with climate change and the shift in species moving north. Curious if you're seeing that in our area of the coast, if there are species either moving out of the area or new ones moving in.
Well, that's a perfect timing for this discussion, because on my list, my to-do list, is call Troy at ODFW and discuss the squid fishery. So when we started the Marine Reserve discussion about, okay, where should the footprint be? What should we allow? Should we allow in the Marine Protected Area? And the discussion was, well, there is a potential for a squid fishery that happens every 15 years. Okay, so we says, oh, okay, I think we could live with that as long as we can gather the data on bycatch and it happens every 15 years. That seems like a good negotiation chip with the fishermen. And we got I think it was like a 13-to-1 consensus that yes, let's move forward with this footprint from north of Yachats to south of the lighthouse. And the caveat was squid fishery could happen under the assumption that it would be every 15 years. But if you look close now, we're on, I think it is 3 squid fisheries in 5 years. So I went to them last year and said, Troy, you guys have got to do a fish management plan. Since they're not here very often, they don't write a management plan. It's, oh, they're here, let's go have at them. It's called a developmental fishery. Well, now that they appear to be here, we've urged them to do that. And right now, there is no fish management plan. And so it's just an example of, is that a shift that's happening? I would have to venture to say yes. And there's implications for seabirds, sea lions, all a suite of things. It's happening in our lifetime, yes.
What are the biggest issues you're dealing with currently? And like, how can people get directly involved? You have a long list there, I know, that we'll share with folks following this. But if you were to say, here's the one thing we really need in the next 6 months, what would you say?
Well, I would ask you, are you a forester, or are you a marine ecologist? Or, you know, so there's a suite of things. If you want to just help, there's ongoing debris cleanup. There's ongoing seabird monitoring during a certain time of year, which is coming up. You could get trained to be a part of our seabird monitoring team, which is at the Cape Falcon area, as well as multiple locations on the coast. Joe from Portland comes down, trains folks, and we have partners, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So and I would have to say, what is your interest? Or if you're just testing the waters, try all of them. Sea star monitoring, try water quality monitoring with Surfrider. All these things are in play. And I would say, try them and see how they interest you. All of them are needed and valuable. And it's like, well, you could actually join the, like I said, look at the list and give me a call and we could talk about it, you know, because there's a lot of opportunities to engage.
So Paul, it feels like you're the clearinghouse of these opportunities, or is there like a one-stop shopping place where people can go and
Well, for around here, and depends if I'm talking to Eugene folks, we're the closest marine reserve, marine protected area in our Cape Perpetua Collaborative. So maybe I could actually back up a little bit and right there, and you can see all those partners there, okay? And ongoing educational events that happen. And then let's see where that list. And so you can see this list with a link. And some of them are Surfrider, some of them is Joe in Portland, and some of them are at if you're interested in whales, you can be a part of the Whale Watch with the Cetacean Society, and you could be a part of the Trails crew. And so there's opportunities for all of those.
Great. We'll be sure to include that list to the volunteer list when we send that out. I only have one more. It's not a question, it's a comment, and it is "You rock, Paul," is what came through. And I have to agree. I am so grateful that you shared your expertise with us, and I'm even more grateful that you have spent decades working really hard to protect this little magical corner of this planet. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to be with us tonight, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming and sitting around. Hopefully you had a glass of wine and just and feel free to check in with me, send me a note. I love to respond and have a dialogue.
Okay, I'll be sure to include your contact info then on that email that's going out. All right, and to everyone out there, Paul did mention beavers, so that's a great segue. Our next HabiChat is April 15th with Brian Bangs, who's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and he's going to be talking about beavers and specifically what the ecological impacts of beavers are. So if you haven't already signed up for that, please join us next month on April 15th. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and end this evening's presentation. I thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a restful and restorative weekend. And thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sam. Have a good weekend.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.